Hey, did you... So, a fun fact about me is that I have a bunch of scars. Like, a lot of scars. Most of them are not noticeable unless I'm wearing short-sleeved shirts, as most of my noticeable injuries are on my arms, but I also have a bunch of other scars on my body. They all were from accidents, but some of them have funny stories attached to them. And so today I'll be talking about all the times I got injured in funny or interesting ways. But first, the art for today's video. A little while ago, Yaylurker posted a video about their upcoming episode, Kid and Leverett, featuring a character named Ben who goes around and invites people to the show. Keith said that they'd like to see people draw Ben inviting characters, whether it's their own OCs, or characters from Meadowlark, or just any other character, whether it's featured in that video or not, to the show. Originally, I wasn't going to join in as I'm a pretty busy person, but I realized that what I was originally going to work on as the art for this video was much more suited for next month's video. I also just recently came up with these 3 characters for a side project that I mentally pick at or doodle when my brain goes that way, and I thought that they suited the vibes that I get from Keith's Meadowlark posting pretty well. Their names are Ping, Casper, and Seer, by the way. They got their own little story that I'm kind of like working on, but nothing that is probably ever going to see the light of day anytime soon. So I decided, why the hell not? Let's get these kiddos to see some good whimsy folk tunes, because the story I certainly got for these kids doesn't allow them for that. So here are these little guys. Feel free to ask about them, but they don't have a lot yet as their story is very bare bones at the moment. Now on to the video. A warning ahead of time, there are a few stories that get pretty graphic, but I try to tone it down for this video. The worst accident I ever got in involving a car or bike or scooter or go-kart was an accidental collision that happened when my mom was driving me and my sister home. A pair of kids hit our car as they were pulling out of a parking lot, but that didn't result in any physical injury, save for the now dented vehicles. So if you don't like hearing about injuries worse than cuts and visible bone, then this is your excuse to stop watching the video. I won't be mad. So let's get on to my injury stories. As I said, I have a ton of scars on my body, but my oldest still visible scar was from when I was 8. Roughly almost 20 years ago at this point, that time I recorded this video. I was playing tag with my cousin in front of my grandparents' house. She was on the bike and I was chasing her wearing shoes that were a couple sizes too big for me. You can probably imagine where this is going, but I need to clarify something before we actually get to that. You see, my grandparents had a huge driveway with a pretty unique feature. Most driveways are paved with concrete, maybe gravel, but my grandparents' driveway was built differently. Yes, it was concrete, but it was also inlaid with tiny rocks, and these rocks were really sharp. This was the kind of driveway you'd walk barefoot on to train for walking on Legos, and I would know because I've done it plenty of times. Sharp rocks can't beat my dislike for shoes, and I've built up the calluses for it. So basically, because of this, when the inevitable happened and I tripped and fell, I ended up scraping my knee. But not just the tiny little scrape you get with falling on concrete, rather, the big scrape that was pouring blood. And I, of course, being 8 and not yet used to the sight of blood, cried and screamed for my parents, who had come out to see the commotion. They brought me inside, washed away the blood, and revealed the actual top of 8-year-old me's kneecap. Just exposed for everyone to see. Have you ever seen your own bone outside of your body? Weird experience. That's my skeleton, just out there for the world to see. You were not supposed to be out there for quite some time, young man. Anyway, because they got the bleeding to stop, they ended up slapping a bunch of band-aids on it, told me not to go running around outside anymore, and they called it a day from there. But now I got this big old square-shaped scar where a hole in my skeleton used to be. Just casually got to lay eyes onto my skeleton. I didn't even have to go to the hospital for it. Ever laid eyes on your skeleton? Don't do it, it's not fun. The scar has finally started to fade a bit, but it's still really noticeable once it's pointed out, so I think it'll be quite a while before it goes away entirely. It's a little funny that the scar exists because my other knee also has a big scar on it, but this one is much newer and looks like a bunch of big scratches, instead of just like the mound of healed over flesh the other scar is. This was from when I was 15 years old. My dog Stella, who was a lot more young and energetic at the time, would get daily walks, and she loved her walks. She's part Jack Russell Terrier. If you have a Jack Russell Terrier, you probably understand. Well, she also liked to bolt if she had the opportunity, and she also hates getting wet. And we had a big rainstorm the other day, so on this walk, there were puddles everywhere. I stepped over one of them, trying to get Stella to come over with me, and she instead slipped out of her collar and bolted. She ran past this big metal piece that was like sticking out of the ground and a dumpster, so she kind of like slid in between it. And when I slid in to catch her and keep going after her, I ended up cutting my leg on the metal. I had a ton of blood pouring down my leg, but I needed to catch my dog. This ended up being a chase where Stella would run ahead. She would stop, she would watch me follow her for a bit, and then she would bolt again. At one point, there was these two men on the road chatting, and Stella, who adores people, went up to them to get their attention. They looked up to see this mutt running after them, and further up to see me limping after her with my bloody and mangled leg, yelling at these men to grab my dog. Thinking about it, they probably thought that she had bit me, hence all the blood, and kept avoiding her until she ran off again. These guys just refused to pet my dog, and she was just crying for their attention. I'm literally recording this while she's laying on my bed. She's just watching me with those big old lady eyes. Anyway, I soon managed to catch her and carry her home, and the wound eventually healed, and now my knees kinda match! Yay! This won't be the first time I either ran or fell into something and got hurt because of it. One time I ran through a bush and got a huge cut on my side that healed into a huge scar. It almost looks like I got stabbed, which is kinda cool, but a lot more mundane than that. However, one time I got distracted walking to class from the bathroom, fell into another bush, and got impaled. The last middle school I went to was an outdoor school, so only the classrooms and bathrooms were inside, and there were bushes and trees for decoration on these elevated garden beds and random places everywhere. A teacher and a bunch of students were photographing something for the school yearbook. The students were laid on the ground in the shape of the year that this photo was being taken at for, like, you know, it's like, oh, it's the middle school's, like, I don't know, like 2011, 2012 class, I forgot what year it was, but the teacher was on the roof taking pictures of them. I was watching and walking backwards, trying to, like, mentally figure out what they were, like, doing, because at the time I didn't understand what it was, and I ended up tripping and falling into a bush, and proceeded to have a piece of a branch impale into my hand. The funniest part about that was I lifted my hand, went, huh, I've been impaled, then ripped a broken stick out of my palm. It wasn't that deep, so I just went back to class. It didn't even leave a scar. But I remember it happening because it's not every day you could just say you've been impaled, so it's going into the video! Even though I have an impalement story, that wasn't the most serious child Daryl injury story. My most serious of younger injuries is one that I have that left a lot of little scars on my fingers. So it doesn't sound that serious, but the story is kind of a little fucked up. So when I lived in San Diego, I lived near a playground, and that playground had a picnic table with a metal overhang on it, kind of like, you know, to shield people from the rain. A couple of kids in my neighborhood and I really wanted to get up there, especially after my brother and his friends had figured out how to get up on it. And one day I finally ended up doing it. I climbed up the tree next to the overhang, balanced on the biggest branch that stretched towards the roof, and managed to jump onto the roof. My friends were excited because now I could help them onto the roof, and we cheered about it. And then proceeded to start panicking when we realized we had no idea how I was going to get down from there. I had to jump to get from the tree to the roof, and I was not jumping back onto that tiny little branch. I'm not scared of heights, but I do not want broken bones. Thank you. I've gone this time, at this point, I've gone through plenty of time without breaking a bone, so not doing that. I studied the edge of the roof and looked down. I was very tall. I'm still very tall, but even at 12 I was very tall. Like almost as tall as my parents tall. Now I'm taller than everybody in my family. So I figured if I could hang down from the side, I could let go and it would only be like a couple foot drop, which, you know, easy. And it was! Until I got my hand stuck on the side of the roof. Turns out the side I decided to go down, the metal railing was broken, and so my hands got stuck, and I was stuck there for a good 10 seconds trying to free my hands. And I hung in the air like that, being like, why can't I let go of this? Why is my hand stuck? Oh no, oh no. And I finally freed myself, but in the process, ripped off a ton of skin from the back of my fingers. Very ouchies. My friends brought me to their house where their mom bandaged my fingers, and I didn't have the heart to tell my mom what happened, and I also didn't want to get in trouble climbing on things I shouldn't have, so I made up a story of tripping and falling and left it at that. I don't think she really cared too much to try to figure out what happened, to be honest, but I had bandages all over my fingers for like the next couple weeks after that, and still ended up climbing trees and things, but I never tried climbing back on that roof again because I did not want to get my skin ripped off again, and I got all these little tiny scars on like the back of some of my fingers. Like there's only still like a few that are still very visible, but that was over like 10 years ago now, so it's to be expected. So when we finally left California, my family made a road trip of it, driving cross country over a couple of weeks and seeing what else America had to offer. One of the places we stopped at for food was in Utah. Now this was in the middle of the summer and it was hot. We were in the desert, and there was nothing but mountains, a prison, a gas station, and Arby's to keep us company. My mom and my brother went to get food, while my stepdad, sister, and I got water for Stella. I was feeling faint, and then one moment, I was standing next to my dog, and the next I felt a huge pain in my arm and was leaning against the car on the ground with my stepdad checking to see if I was okay. Apparently I had fainted and fell on someone's car, hitting my funny bone so hard that my arm was numb for almost an hour. I ended up being fine after that once I got some water and food in me, but I was stuck in the front seat of the car until we got to our hotel, which was perfect for me because I had been holding our dog for the whole trip and enjoyed the break. I don't know if I dented the car I fell on, but I'm very sorry to the guy in Utah who stopped at an Arby's and returned to their car to possibly find a Daryl-shaped dent on it. Anyway, most notable injuries I got after middle school were bug ones, bee stings, the wasp bites from my insect nightmare storytime video, and a couple of health scares. But I managed to go through my high school years mostly unscathed. It wasn't until I started working until I got some of my next physical injury stories. But my time in Dock 2 and the Bullseye store left me with many scratches and scrapes, some that scarred over from just working the job. Sometimes it's a mishandling of a box cutter slightly, other times it's a very good paper cut from a cardboard box. I can attribute to the scars on my arms for mostly being that, but like any job, you don't always leave them unscathed. So here's a fun story. I am very particular about when I take my breaks at work. Since most places I worked at didn't have a schedule for when we had to take a break, I would time my breaks in the middle of the shift, at the o'clock or 5 till. I like timing my breaks in 5s because it's easier to keep track of. This is important to know for this story so you can understand the mindset I was in. It was around spring in my last year at Dock 2. The store was very slow, and I decided to spend the last few minutes before my break going outside and picking up any loose trash from the truck that morning. My coworker was out there putting furniture together, and I was picking up trash while talking to him. Now for anyone who doesn't work a retail job or does not do stockroom work and may not know this, but when loading merchandise on and off a truck, there is a small, heavy, kinda easy-ish to move around loading ramp that places use to make wheeling and stepping onto the truck easier. If you know what I'm talking about, then you also know that these things are solid steel and are just dense. They're heavy, and if you are not able to lift them up, you have to kind of like drag them around. They got these like 2 big prongs that poke out so the pallet doesn't slide around when things are being wheeled over it. I'm pretty sure most people know what I'm talking about. But I went over to pick up trash right next to where the thing was leaning against the wall, prongs facing away from the wall. And I quickly stood up while talking to my coworker and hit the side of my head against one of these heavy metal prongs. The next few minutes was me holding my head and walking in circles silently while my coworker stared at me in shock. When I was finally able to compose myself and stand up straight, all he had to say was, "If I was you and I did that, I would have been screaming cusses." Oh, you bet I was thinking them. I was thinking so many cusses, but I did not want to startle anybody inside, and I just kept my mouth shut because, oh boy, that hurt so bad. I got sent home afterwards with a huge lump on the side of my head that didn't go away for a week and left a very sore spot for a while afterwards. And until very recently, whenever I would see anything that vaguely would look like head injury potential, I would get really bad phantom pain on the area of my head. It doesn't really happen anymore, but it's very annoying, especially if you like see anything that like looks kind of slippery and it's like, oh, side of the head hurts. Ow. I ended up not going to the hospital for this injury. My head didn't feel injured outside of the bump, and I felt fine after I lie down, but apparently I should have gone to the hospital because now I have an actual dent in my skull. It's not visible, but I can feel it when I press my fingers to the side of my head where I hit it, like a healed over crack. It's not visibly noticeable, but like if you know where it's at, you can feel it, and it's like, oh yeah, that's definitely a dent in your head, and it's there. However, I did go to the hospital once for a physical injury, all because of canned spaghetti. Not saying the brand name because I don't want to get in trouble, but if you're American, it's not really hard to guess which brand it is. I had recently gotten hired at the Bullseye store and had to stop by the place after work at Dock 2 to grab some groceries. My family went on a trip to the other side of the country, and there wasn't anything for dinner at home. I saw the canned spaghetti sitting on a shelf and decided, yes, this is what I want for dinner. I went home at 10 p.m. at night, ready for spaghetti. I took care of my animals, then opened the can, and proceeded to cut my hand on the lid, spraying blood everywhere. I put my hand in my shirt. Luckily, it was a black shirt, so it didn't stain it, like, very noticeably, but I still had, like, blood all over it. And I ran over to put my hand in the sink. But every time I took my hand out of the water, it would go back to gushing out blood. Then I frantically called my mom, who I mentioned is on the other side of the country, and couldn't drive back over to take me to the hospital. Or even, like, take a plane. I couldn't drive at the time, so she asked me to call a friend to take me to the hospital, and my friends are night owls, so they were most likely still up. I did that, and my friend John of Revelations Nevada fame was nice enough to take me to the hospital and stay with me and then drive me home. It was very nice of him. The doctor gave me a tetanus shot and said because the cut was so clean, he was just going to glue it shut instead of giving me stitches. I was sent home and had to call out my very last Doc 2 shift because Can Spaghetti sent me to the hospital. Now I have a cool scar on my finger. Nice. It's not a big scar, but it's pretty noticeable. I also have a bit of a silly story, so I don't remember which shot I got, but I got the COVID shot that I had to get like a first shot and then a month later get a second one. And this was the one where every time people got it, they said that the first shot was fine, but then with the second shot, they would get flu-like symptoms and they would get like knocked out from it. Well, I had the exact opposite reaction with the shot, where the first shot just completely wiped me out and the second shot did nothing to me other than like, you know, usual getting vaccinations, your arm hurts for a little bit and then it's gone kind of pain. One of these things would be that I would get easily lightheaded after getting the shot and would need to sit down a lot. I also felt like crap the first few days after I got the shot and had some other issues, but the lightheadedness was like the most relevant for this story. One night I woke up and I had to use the restroom and Stella was sleeping in my room. I'm kind of realizing at this point of recording this that a lot of these injury stories involve my dog. I love her to death. So I went to go to the bathroom, and Stella is an old dog, and she was still pretty old around the time this happened, so she occasionally would get up and pace at night or would want a midnight bathroom break. So I left the bathroom, and she was already leaving my room and heading downstairs, probably to go to the front door so she could be let out. I went after her, got halfway through the hall, and then the next thing I remember is I'm on the stair landing, on the ground, leaning against the wall with a handful of cat litter and both of my parents standing over me. From what we were able to gauge, I left the bathroom, followed my dog, fell into the cat litter box that was in the hallway by the stairs, then proceeded to still try and go down the stairs, only to fall down and knock a painting off the wall, which is fantastic because I didn't remember anything happening between when I came to on the bottom of the stairs and when I stepped out of that bathroom. My head hurt where I hit, but me and the wall were fine, so I just went back to bed and slept off the headache once we got all of the cat litter off of me. My stepdad thought it was very funny. I got some injuries for my current job, but because I still work there, as I said in my previous video, I'm not going to talk too much about them, but like, you know, if you work with animals, you can kind of gauge what kind of injuries I probably have gotten. I did get one like recently that I think was really funny, where I just like grabbed this like grate cutter my mom has and like went and I cut up my thumb pretty good, and like it's healing over and it's probably not going to leave a scar, but like I was like writing the script for this video, finished it, and then that happened, and I got like really annoyed about it. With that in mind, that is the end of my video. And here's the final art. I can't wait to play with these characters more. I have a couple of small worlds. I've been sticking characters for possible like eventual anthology stories I want to do someday. Like I have like a zombie apocalypse themed story. The one that these kids are in particular is like a dark fantasy story akin to like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, whatever. And like I want to do like more singular story stuff set in like little playground worlds that I could just throw my OCs into whenever, like especially like my fan OCs. I got like a bunch of little projects I've been doing that with, like sticking my OCs that I don't use for other stuff into these instead, and this is just kind of one of them. Someday I'll figure them out, as well as like their story and more of the world that they're in. I actually do have some cool ideas, but because I'm not actually like actively doing anything with this, I don't really want to talk about it too much now, but I got some like cool ideas. So yeah, that's it. If you like what I do, consider becoming a patron on my Patreon. We started Chapter 3 of In Harmony last month, and patrons get pages 2 weeks early, along with some early access art, chapter PDFs, and more. If you're not convinced yet, then go read In Harmony and decide for yourself. I also have started a new short series, What a Prompt. If you ever have trouble with figuring out what to draw, try one of the prompts I have. They're designed to push you to do other things and think creatively, and I'll be sprinkling in little art lessons and resources as we go. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good one. Bye!